today for my last Satanism Sundays of this month. About Evoking Eternity by E.A. Koetting. I wrote this on the 14th of the 10th month of 1436. And the background prayer is alone in the bottom, proceeding in distant cause, God who is. Valorous, truth revealed. Do this quickly, sweetheart. Oneness. And to share of the signs that I will be going over today. Or that you may want to look back and think of these when I mention these names. My hand will be doing some of these gestures. And the second book I read this month was E.A. Koetting's Evoking Eternity, Forbidden Rites of Evocation. It should be worth $2 to $30 to buy one of his books used, or worth the read to those who can get past the beliefs and practices that they disagree with. Among those who would read an occult book, that is. Finding one of the books of the head of the Become a Living God movement are usually at least $100 used, but they are better written and more informative than some of the sources mentioned therein. Even those who are not good writers or artists may find it important to personalize their own system of beliefs and practices. One of the messages of the book is that bringing out your own results requires your own thought and feeling into how to make it work, rather than merely memorizing something free from someone else's grimoire or scripture. Last month, I expressed some of my understanding from each of 30 Jews or divisions of Al-Quran, show how I experience the lexicography of what is conveyed therein. Whether private or public, you are capable of adapting your own practices and formulating your knowledge and understanding. This 2009 Vulgaris book from Exaxar Occult Literature starts with a poem named Manifestation. It is about feeling how your only salvation is through manifesting metaphysical demons in your worldly existence. When you treat beings as gods and goddesses, can it make you more of a god yourself, or does it make you slaves to creations and egregores? Whether it is your mind saying your name or another spiritual entity, is that feeling of control what you seek? Is it worth bringing hell on earth and hereafter to get what you want in the moment, or merely attempting to? Summoning is section 1, and it contains the introduction, elementary principles of evocation, the summoned, prepared works, the vision and the voice, and basic evocation. Aided Ascent is part 2, and it contains emissaries of ascent, multiple evocators, multiple evocations, evoking legions, evoking without bounds, and summoning God. The first chapter points out the difference between calling things forth or evoking and calling things in or invoking. Both of these have been practiced by every major faith group grouping throughout and beyond history. Of course, a Satanist would be striving to unchristianize and unjudaize the grimoires that were either written by Judeo-Christian practitioners or those they influenced. Now, a lot of the Bible can be unchristianized, unjudaized by returning to the actual language and looking at other potential meanings and context. Another thing one will notice in people like this is that they either speak of different names or qualities of God, or a false god, or false goddess in their tradition as different entities, or they will claim that the same entity mentioned in a different language is not the same entity. There may be things that produce sound, represent things, formulas to recite, or otherwise convey, and other tools. The outer forms matter not as much as the actual spirit of the rite. Rituals should be both specific in terms of what you want and in terms of what you are representing and addressing. The religionist or the spiritualist should also have the goal in being able to use the rituals for whatever situation. Al-Quran 4, 101 through 103, Al-Quran 4, 101 through 103 mentions the shortening and even altering the positions of the contact or as-salah in times of danger, traveling, and sickness. It also mentions how when war is over and won is well, that the times and forms should be observed normally again. Different rituals have different purposes, and even E.A. Koetting will tell you that prescribed rituals will work best with specific entities and purposes better. You should understand the basics to address circumstances in those parts of your life you may not know specific correspondences and rituals for. If you want to do all that, one shouldn't have to ceremoniously read things all the time. You should delay practices till you shouldn't delay practice till you understand and know a whole ritual either. I used to go through the movements and say only a few words when I was performing. The ritual prayers are a salah. It isn't, as described here, that one becomes all-knowing, all-powerful, or becomes present everywhere somehow. It is that we experience more in these categories through practicing rituals like those prescribed through prophets of God and derived by mystics and scholars. There are names and symbols, both revealed and formulated through grids, and other methods of pattern forming, incantations, communications, requests, retractions, and interpretations. And yes, I am ceremoniously reading my paper, and something you should know about evocation is that when you evoke yourself. So you're not really traveling through time and space and matter and all that. You're traveling psychically, you're traveling spiritually, if that's what you're evoking for. The second chapter looks at what is experienced and the nature of its reality. Some take an atheist stance and won't believe in spiritual realities when the rituals bring forth things they can't explain. Others will accept whatever interpretation of reality they are fed, whether or not they experience it. Whether one looks at one tree of life or four to categorize the entities, it can make a lot of sense in its attributes. There are unfallen angels. They transcend what fiction has given us, and are both things not ascribed to angels and of that which the various mythologies have ascribed to them. Most of what spiritually minded people mean by angels is fallen angels. Even they that are called demons here are beyond what is ascribed to them. They do have males and females. E.A. Koetting may gloss over it, but it is really demons or false angels that may be attracted when angels are worshipped. The Become a Living God movement may get people to feel it doesn't matter whether invoking angels or evoking demons, because both can be equally bend to serve you as a god. The reality behind that is by worshiping other than God, you are attracting certain entities and energies into the ritual space and your life. There is a reality behind a certain statement in the Bhagavad Gita. When you worship, what you worship and how does matter, and thus affects your afterlife. In this life, it is your psychology that is affected. When you want to change these things, there are exorcisms that rely on the authority of a tradition and its clerics, and that which relies on the psycho-spiritual influence upon the exorcised and their willingness in the rite. I have a lot of practice with the latter, and the former seems to conflict with trust in God. Authentic orthodoxy and an orthopraxy in reality. Whether angels, demons, elementals, planetary intelligences, and spirits, spirits of the dead and their shadows, are wandering spirits, pay attention to relevance and be specific in how you make a record of and interact with your experience. I, however, hold Al-Quran 4:125 to be correct in proclaiming the best system of judgment to be that of submission to God in righteousness. The next verse gives the reason, being God's control of the macrocosm and microcosm. Why not just render service to or express peace in accord with the one in control of all? The third chapter involves preparation for major rituals. And one of the things I would like to say about the angels is that the light beings of the angels, the unfallen angels, the devas, the ahuras, the madriaks, whatever you want to call them, are not really gendered. They don't really have a choice. They're like a living computer of God sort of thing going on. The prophetic tradition would give this in an order like faith, intent, ablutions, extra practices beforehand, marking the start of the ritual and the horizon itself. E.A. Koetting gives a list like hyping yourself up, rearranging the scene, invoking omnipotence, which is really either getting in an arrogant mood or trying to feel or see a little different. Using or making a ritual tools, dagger, chalice, altar, and the like, and making or bringing out sacred shapes or diagrams to have in the site of the ritual. The fourth chapter addresses whether or not the ritual works. There is clairvoyance and clairaudience. Whether or not you experience psychedelic or psychic phenomenon, or even truly metaphysical things, it may not be a sign of your success. There's a truth that one shouldn't get low expectations or lack of immediate signs get in the way of performing an act. Oh, I meant one shouldn't let low expectations or lack of immediate signs get in the way of performing an act. Things have reactions in the physical, the psychic, and the spiritual realms without our noticing them all the time. There seems to be a lack of clarity and distinction in some of how Koetting describes physical and other manifestations. Some might disagree with his condemnation of using a pointer by his friend in a ritual as a crutch when not needed. It may be very well that things like yes, no, and an indicator grounds the results and doesn't allow the operator to change what they may mean later. Whether you are gifted with an experience of a visual, audio, or other nature, pay close attention and record the matter accurately. I do agree that it may be best to hold interpretations till afterwards. Whatever your spiritual path, live like it works. The 5th chapter is about the fundamentals. The Pope, for his Easter sermon, condemned fundamentalists, people who turn straight to the scripture instead of going through a priest. On the left-hand path, we turn to our own knowledge. Whether we're part of the right-hand path or not, we turn to our own knowledge and interpretation of the basics. Our experience is valid. Making or procuring fresh items for a ceremony can help. Most details are to make the specific traditions or type of magic work. Keep it going. Work on your focus. Consecrate yourself, the tools, and the environment. These may be once or even before, during, and after the ritual. In the occult, there is the rite itself and the experience particular to that event. In Islam, we see this through the rites of Al-Quran, being believe, practice, understand, learn, preach, and experience. You may experience realities, or in a way no one else does. People, like the wife of whom he boarded a room from, may see light and hear sound that are not beheld by the one or group that performed the ritual. Be appropriate in the portrayal of the mythology in your ritual, and be careful what you wish for. Koetting may contain dogma and magical thinking of other groups in some of his videos. What is his methods of imagining things till they are experienced as reality and reciting spells without sharing meaning of any words then? He does seem to be right that possession and its degrees are one's own choice, and we shouldn't lose ourselves and the goal of ascent. The 6th chapter is about how the material accomplishments or results are more of a means to an end, and how one supposedly needs help. Can you really control the ones you seek to help you, whether you call it Al-Quran 1.5 or 1.4? I would agree that God is whom should be worshipped alone, and who should be sought for help alone. All else are means. By worshiping God alone, there's no need to banish, and we will witness or experience whatever we need anyways. Supernal servitors or unfallen angels are an example of something that is here and attracted by good regardless. The list of 6 and the sigillum of each may be deemed suspicious by some, for more reasons than their number. Degal, Sakatos, Raziel, Derdekas, Metron, and Enki Dorad have symbols I don't remember. And like some other seals in this book, they appear not to be sourced. The bibliography mentions books, but one shouldn't have to read all the books involved to see if any of them see their legacy here. Demonic ascent is justified by some and claims that it is to achieve a balance of dark and light. And an important thing I would like to say here is that the sigils, they mean something. They may mean different things to different people, but they may not just be the entities. Within the various symbols, you see things said. Somebody from Africa told me that they were watching something or heard something that claimed that the symbols were because people's memories aren't too good nowadays, and or some people don't learn as is to simplify the process of their sihr, their evil magic. And there's some grounds to that, but there's always been symbols. But what's even been lost nowadays is the symbols don't seem to come with a meaning themselves. If you don't know anything about symbology, or if you don't experience it, you really have no clue. The seal of Belial, Azazel, and a demonic language called Ens, has a familiarity, but Azathoth and Adramelech are shown with symbols I didn't remember. But Adramelech is familiar to many of us who read the Bible, listen to biblically based stories, or went to many of the churches. 4 so-called kings of the world are given with their signs. They are the Jinn under south and fire, Paralda under air and east, Nitzah over water and west, Kob over north and earth. To me, this seems like minimalizing and recategorizing other mythology without knowledge. Al-Quran 436 mentions the belief in God, his light beings are eternally obedient. Angels, and accepting all the scriptures revealed to God's prophets. I am all for accepting that things did happen in lives that we can't prove. But why switch from organized religion to organizing one's beliefs and practices out of underground dogmas, usually started and altered by unknown figures? Chapter 7 addresses the fact that group ritual may not be needed to make things work or even make them safer. There is a definite social factor to doing something as a group. But even scientific studies show there may be more going on than bonding. It may be more difficult to organize a group drama, but practice makes it all worthwhile for me. Other than an unusual multiplication, rather than a usual multiplication of physical, psychic, and even spiritual entities beyond merely increasing the number of people is the bringing in of different character types and skills. There should be collective learning of some sort and a natural organization when those rules differ. A barbarous invocation is offered as an example of something for a group to learn before doing a group ritual. Now that pentagram chant, Solazor, Abdia, Haliza, Balator, Balani, Ali, Hurrah, I have that playing backwards too. An Abartala sigil and ritual are given as an example that can be used to construct one's own ceremony. For addressing multiple entities, Tenimbrion, Mastiphal, maybe, Piraska, Buskar, Endrifal, Exarpial, Alator, and Marisco are given with sigilia and attributes for those who would like to construct a ritual with multiple entities. Just as different people bring in different energies that are hard to work with, a multitude of otherworldly entities may make things easier. A multitude of otherworldly entities may make things either more difficult or more effective. Chapter 8 deals with working through a series separately or at once. Are we really killing what people call gods and goddesses? Or do they have respite till Judgment Day? Are we causing damage in the metaphysical realms, or are we causing damage within ourselves? Could it be that we are actually restructuring our own consciousness instead? Dunkal and Fairtall are given as examples of ones to write their sigil and evoke in the same evocation with their seals. The guardians of the watchtowers are Raphael, Michael, Gabriel, and Ariel are mentioned with sigilia that I don't recognize, except Ariel's. Beelzebub is given a sigil like that unto Baal, but with a much larger lower shield, and a sphere or circle where it joins with what would be the ground or edge. Lucifer, Ashtaroth, and Azazel are familiar signs. Be careful of conflicts of intention. Chapter 9 is about legends and legions involved with ceremonial and freeform magic. Before I say something about the painting story, allow me to mention how I am willing to sell my symbolic art for the right offers. The story of how enthralled he was at a painting back in 1999 or whenever he was 16, 1997 or whenever he was 16. The story of how enthralled he was at a painting back in 1997 or whenever he was 16 explains how mesmerized he is at the mention of the way his books come bound in leather, a practitioner of sihr, or evil magic, with thousands of demons behind him. But him continuing steadfast on is a powerful encouragement. E.A. Koetting was right that devil worship is much more essential to the version of the left-hand path that ignores the right-hand path, as they are brought up for the taboo matters. Magic squares are used as a method to open the gateways in this world, and have been used far longer than E.A. Koetting realizes, since the emergence of Yazidi-like faiths in Turkey to Syria 12,000 years ago. The patterns of symbols or letters can be contemplated upon, mentioned in rituals, are formed into the names or sigilia of any egregor or actual entity that comes to mind. Now, before I go on, April Fool's Day may link to the Yazidi New Year of Red Wednesday, which occasionally happens on April 1st. But the first, full moon after the equinox, nearest Wednesday, Tuesday, you put the flowers on the door. So that's their New Year's coming up. Are these the patterns of symbols or letters can be contemplated upon, mentioned in ritual, are formed into the names or sigilia of any egregor or actual entity that comes to mind? Are these hosts of unwanted forces just going to leave because you recite some barbarous incantation? How is removing 80 squares from Gono Ahat, or the Enochian tablet of air, mixing it with the fire element and rendering it into the forbidden Enochian square? Probably because somebody with Golden Dawn-like ideas told him that only including some of the lettering, banner, zodiac, senior, and Calvary, invoking and evoking, while excluding the lesser angel squares and names of governing, was evil. Some might use a house sigillium to call upon similar spirits like he does with Kel and the mercurial entities. Many will find the spiritual experience and effects of ritual magnified when they act as a servant. E.A. Koetting claims that he had similar results no matter what he worshipped. Once he adapted his methods, he learned between March of 2001 and almost 7 years later in the Sacred Order of the Son of God. After resigning from his offices in satanic orders and cutting off ties with witchcraft or Satanist groups. He conflicts with this in other sources, but this is his story. He was then to shut off some functions to let things through that feelings or thoughts had blocked before. The fervor of devotion gave him the experience machine that only seemed to change as far as what was evoked or invoked. Chapter 10 is about reducing the limitations with calling things forth. Can you continually build up the ability as time goes on rather than let things get stagnant? Work on establishing a temple space and destroying it. Chaos magic operates on this principle of building up and letting go. Worship should be a bond where you connect within or without the boundaries of ceremonial magic. What do you call the religion of a Satanist? The 11th and final chapter has E.A. Koetting's 5 elements of devotion in taking something to be a god or goddess, and includes the form of devotion, association with alleged partners of what you worship, and sacrifice. A devotee should study to make the choices of what spiritual practices to do and the context for doing them. The devotion itself should be done in a specific manner, in a way that is satisfying in itself. A true God is not like creation in anything, except in that our words of divine qualities are appropriate enough without giving us a full idea of essences. That which is truly worship-worthy will have no partners, co-workers, gender, or morphisms. Only creations that serve him willingly and unwillingly. Guidance may not come directly from an entity, but that which serves it are with items that remind of it. A servant and devotee of something should be willing to strive and make sacrifices. After initial contact with worshiping something other than God, certain items or tasks may be asked for. It might be as simple as offering of your bodily fluids, that of another willing being with a physical body, or animal, or dedicating something already owned for it. Why would a god need flesh and blood offerings to grant us what we wish, rather than appreciate our obedience and effort? On page 123, we learn that these contain matters to keep secret for social and legal reasons. Do the demons really make it harder for authorities to discover you, or do they make it easier? On page 191 through 194, E. A. Koetting mentions worshiping D and needing no other god since 12/18/2002. Could it be Azazel or Iblis under the Greek guise of Diabolos? This seems to be the best guess based on the focus on one of those names and other similar names for the same in other languages. Page 188 mentions how these so-called gods, how this so-called god has a true nature so fiery that people will consider them demonic. Anybody see that Childhood's End? How far are you willing to go for a chance to experience something different in yourself? Al-Quran 4:119 through 120 mentions how the devils only distort creation and create illusions. This is the essence of the devil card in the tarot. There is no benefit that is not part of piety and God consciousness. Vice is only the mirror of some of that. And to remind you of the symbols, hard to see some of them, but I would use this chant that you hear in my evening rite. I would recite it 1 to 73 times, depending on the number of the Koetting entity referred to. And in this case, I have the sigil of Vassago, number 3, so I'd say that 3 times. Solazor Adia Aliza Bellator Bellani Ariara Solazor Andia Aliza Bellator Bellani Ariara Solazor Andia Aliza Bellator Bellani Aliara.